was right.
Yes.
Yes. Well, welcome to the Chaos Table. I'm Jozlyn. Yeah, we were just talking about cancel culture. Oh my God, I can't even say that. That's like a tongue twister.
Yeah.
We were just kind of checking in. I have a little fun something that I want to ask you guys. If you were gonna have a lifetime of the last thing you drank, if you're gonna have a lifetime supply of the last thing you drank, what would you be drinking for the rest of your life? It's just like a silly question, just to get the ball rolling.
My throat coat tea.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
I love that tea.
Me too.
It's the best tea. Mine would obviously be Tito's. I love my Texas vodka and my Bywater. So I'm hydrated and relaxing at the same time.
Yes.
Frankie.
Well, mine is this vitamin zero water, which is the first time I've had this flavor and I hate it. So I'm screwed.
No. You are screwed.
Yeah.
Well, cheers. I'm so glad that you guys are here tonight.
Cheers.
I'm the only one that's in having an adult beverage, but that's
no. I have my adult beverages. I just didn't start yet. And
All
I have
right.
my husband to thank because just before I came in, I couldn't open the bottle of amaretto because that's actually what I really like is I like amaretto.
Ooh.
But I'm not a big drinker. I don't have it often. So I think the last time was months ago. And so I was texting him. He was in with my toddler, getting him to bed. I'm like, I can't open it, so he just came in and saved the day with my amaretto. But
that's delicious. And that's like such a little fancy cup. I love it. It's
I know,
little,
so fancy.
But I had to prove that I'm really not that fancy. So I brought the other alternate drink, which is a can of wine.
Nice. I love it. Is that 14 hands? That's a good one.
Never had it. Never had it. It was available in our local, little grocery store or gas station right here. Like a couple weeks ago, my husband was going down. Do you want anything? I was like, well, do they have any individual wine things? And so he brought it back for me, but I hadn't tried it yet.
Those are the best because, I live in Florida. So going to the beach and taking a bottle of wine is a nightmare, so now that everything's canned, it's just, and it's individual, right? So you can, yeah, it's perfect. That's awesome.
I did not know they made those.
They do.
I'm from the box of wine school. And remember the jug? The jug.
Oh my God, totally. I love it. Well, we're not here to talk about alcohol though. And now we're going to start like a bunch of lushes. But Frankie brought up the best piece of information is that you want to share with us like what you said earlier about what's happening tonight. Cause I was like, perfect.
Oh, right. The SpaceX Inspiration 4 launch. Yeah, they're sending 4 civilians into the our orbit.
And when he mentioned that when we were texting,
happening now.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, that's like perfect timing because you're all about like space and science and we're gonna geek out about it. So
yep. And I was just watching it just a few minutes ago. I'm very excited that they everything seemed to go flawlessly. They made it to orbit. It's fantastic.
I have to tell you, I was watching a little bit of it and I'm seeing these civilians, strapped in and they're waiting and they're like T-minus 10 minutes. And then they're like talking and then they're like T-minus 7 minutes. And I'm like, oh my God, I'd have to go to the bathroom. I'd be like, excuse me. Whoever's in charge of this, I need to let me out of the rocket. I got to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, they look so excited. I mean, they were bumping each other and that whole giddy kind of way. And I'm sure they were. It's fantastic.
I honestly didn't even know anything about it until I was at a group workout. And one of my girlfriends, we were talking about what are we watching on TV right now? And she's like, my husband and I, we watch a show every night. And right now we're watching on Netflix this, Inspiration 4 countdown thing. And I think it's Elon Musk is, I guess Elon Musk is involved and her husband's a big fan of him. And I was like, what? Yeah. Wow. I just couldn't believe it. Are you surprised that this happened? Or are you not surprised at all?
Well, as someone who, my day job is in the industry, I work in the aerospace industry and I currently work for Northrop Grumman. And although as of a few years ago, I worked for a company called Orbital ATK and we were acquired by Northrop Grumman and Orbital and now Northrop Grumman. We're one of the companies that also similar to SpaceX, we supply, we do resupply to the International Space Station. Yeah. So following this stuff and following what SpaceX does and following what we do, this is kind of, par for the course. Although I will have to admit, just because I've been so busy, crazy with work, I forgot it was tonight until one of my coworkers reminded me. He's like, "Are you watching the thing tonight?" I'm like, "Wait, that's tonight." And I had almost slipped my mind. somehow.
I know. And I was getting ready to podcast. I'm like, ran out to my kids. I'm like, is everybody okay? I'm like, you guys get on YouTube quick. Like, shut down the video games. This is like history making stuff. And they're like, they're like, eh. You know, I mean, it's really, I mean, and honestly, I was like trying to like listen to all of it. And I'm thinking, because, you know, NASA's Kennedy, they launched from NASA's Kennedy Space Center, correct? Is that Cape Canaveral or is that different?
So it's all kind of co-located, you know, for all intents and purposes, you should think of it as co-located. But yeah, Kennedy Space Flight Center is where the launch was from.
It's kind of like Disney, Universal, like they're all kind of in the same
like
realm, Magic Kingdom kind of thing.
So you're in Florida. I got a text from one of my stepsisters who lives in Florida. They saw it from her driveway and she was texting me pictures and little videos. I'm so jealous because I'm up in Maryland and it's pouring rain here. So we weren't going to see anything.
Honestly, it was pouring rain earlier today. So when Frankie texted me that, I was like, I don't know. But then again, like that's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. And yes, we can see a lot of launches that happen. And when we first moved down here, like, I don't know, this is our fourth summer. My husband, every time a launch was going to happen, he was like, oh my God, we got to wake up earlier. Oh my God, it's like, we got to walk outside, and we would try to see it. But a lot of times they get shut down too, because depending on the weather down here or whatever, and especially since we're like in hurricane season. So how did you get into space? And like, you know, like I'm thinking like for me, I'm thinking space is like Star Trek, Star Wars, you know, we talk about science. I'm thinking weird science. You know, I go all the way back to like robots. I'm thinking like Lego robotics when my oldest was in, like, what, like, how did you get involved? Is that's
actually pretty accurate, you know. So I'm a child of the 80s, and as such, you know, my dad was an engineer, and so Star Trek was something that was on, and I grew up you know, with Star Wars, you know, and playing with the Star Wars figures, and each room in our house was a different like location, you know, from Star Wars. Like one room was like the Death Star and one room was Tatooine and everything. But then Star Trek Next Generation started when I was in 7th grade. And some point around there is when the real, you know, light bulb went off. I mean, I'd always been interested in science. It was obvious I was going to do something technical, but really wanting to do space really developed somewhere around there. And so that was what I really always planned to do. And robots, R2-D2 and C-3PO were my first love of robots.
So cool.
Yes. But the problem being a child in the 80s versus today is I didn't have access to much.
Right.
I mean, there wasn't Lego Mindstorm. You know, we had Legos, but there weren't any of the technical components. And if you know, I had exhausted the knowledge my dad had, and there wasn't much in the library. There wasn't the internet. So it was very limiting into what I could do. And it really actually didn't start till college, I guess, that I really was able to do a little more robot stuff. But I programmed. I was a, you know, computer programmer. I was that geek, you know. Some of the Tom girls played sports. I was the one sitting with my computer doing computer things and all that. And that was just,
Do you actually like build robots and create robots? And I mean, Frankie, were you telling me about something about oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So this is my robot cat that I've been working on and off for like the last month or two. It's something that I found on a project I found online, and it was kind of there's a kit, but I didn't want to buy the kit. I wanted to kind of do more of a do it yourself. And someone else had drew all the pieces that I could download and then print on my 3D printer. And I bought the electronics board now. So it's all physically together. I just have to wire it up, and I have to figure out how to program it and do the next steps. But yes.
It's so crazy. When you say 3D printer, like, are you talking like it literally is like 3D? Like my husband like had a friend who had one, and he printed me off like a little like puppy, like my dog. And it's like, when you think of printer, you think of like flat Stanley. You don't think of like 3D printing. Like, what is that?
So think of it printing in layers. So it prints a layer and then prints another layer on top and another layer on top. It's essentially that. And they're fairly inexpensive. And I got one as a quarantine purchase. Actually, that was my initial like kind of freak out. I'm spending money kind of at the beginning of quarantine is what I did, but I'd wanted one for years. I was hoping that my older son would want to like do some school project, and would have to buy it.
Right.
But that never happened. So quarantine happened and they're like, well, I'm buying one for myself. And that's what I did.
I think everybody has like a quarantine purchase for sure. Like Frankie,
I might have 2 or 3.
Yeah, me too. Right. Frankie, what was your quarantine purchase? Anything? Some people got dogs, right? Like they were like,
I
people
wish
get
I
dogs.
could get a dog, but I just can't. I work too many hours. But no, I got this whole console for like my podcast stuff.
Oh,
and I
right,
also
right.
bought a whole lot of clothes and stuff like that, which I don't know why, because where was I gonna go?
Right.
There's no, you know what I mean? Like there all these clothes, nowhere to go.
Right.
But yeah, so that's me. What about you?
I don't know. I'm like thinking to myself, like, I bought like more microphones. So same thing, like podcasting stuff and
Yeah.
more stuff for the kids. Like, I think I bought
Mhm.
I was like trying to buy a slip and slide because I was like, how am I going to keep these kids occupied? Right. And it's so dang
Yeah.
hot down here. But, every slip and slide I tried to buy got canceled and like on back order and we never got one. I just finally bought one just like recently. So, anyways, and I think we got like a big giant pool, like a hard pool for the dogs, but nothing cool like a 3D printer. Nothing cool
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. A lot of my friends got dogs and chickens. I have several friends who did quarantine chickens.
Why chickens? Like
I
why?
don't know.
Like why? Like I don't know. Like So take us through like robots because
Mhm.
Frankie was also bringing up something about what was it? The dynamic robots or what was that
Boston
thing?
Dynamics.
Yes, those are
Boston
pretty
Dynamics.
amazing.
I'm obsessed. Yes, and I
Yeah.
watch the YouTube videos, and they dance, and sometimes they do like parkour. But I
Mhm.
have to say, like their movement is so lifelike that I
Mhm.
find myself like how when they have those videos, and I know they're testing them, but they like kick them or they trip
Mhm.
them. I feel bad. Is that like I
For
feel bad for them. Like I'm
Mhm.
like emotionally attached to these robots.
So I feel like that's a good feeling. I mean,
Yeah.
that whole concept of even though again they're a machine, but how we and now
Right.
some of the kicking and everything is really just to test them. They're doing it to test them to demonstrate what they're
Right.
capable of. But I think
Yeah.
that is a good feeling because that whole do unto others, no matter what those others are, is that you'd have them do unto you. So
Right.
I'm glad you have that
Right.
feeling.
Thank
right,
you.
because just because they're
Thank
like
you
a
for validating
robot.
me.
Yeah. No, I mean, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier about like robots like taking over the world,
Mhm.
like I mean it's or like the whole AI thing. Like someone was telling
Mhm.
me that it's not just Alexa or an Echo, it's actually like their stove, right? Their
Mhm.
stove and their fridge is all
Yeah.
like a robot basically. Like it
Well,
Mhm.
but they're not sentient, right? It is just all they are collecting data, and it's not that the devices, the companies. There's a lot of data collection, and that does freak me out. Even though I'm someone that I've got my cell phone here, I have both Alexa and Google
Yeah.
all over our house. It is really the data collection and what the humans behind all that can do.
Right.
Alexa's not taking over the world.
Right.
Google, the devices, they're not doing anything. It's what the people and the corporations and everything behind that could possibly do with all that information on us. We're a long way away from the robot or the AI being
Right.
able to truly do anything.
And I still like, and also like one of my girlfriends was telling me about, self-driving cars, like
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. Like, where does that fit into the realm of all this? I mean,
It's AI
yeah,
in the sense that it's an algorithm. It is I don't want to use the word smart, but it is an interesting algorithm, but it really is still an algorithm. It's doing what it's programmed to do. It's very sophisticated, very, very complex, sophisticated, requires a lot of data, a lot of good data to make the right decisions, but it's still just following an algorithm. It's not reasoning the way you or I are reasoning, or, it's not problem solving the way we are. It's
right.
following a program.
That's just so crazy to me because I mean,
Mhm.
I grew up back in the day where like, there was Atari, none of these
Mhm.
gaming
Yeah.
systems, like there's still tabletop,
Mhm.
games and restaurants and stuff like that. It's all like super old school. And then you look at some of like the technology that's come, even there
Yeah.
weren't even cell phones. Like
Yep.
we still had the phone on the wall with
Yep.
the 25-foot cord, you left the
Mhm.
house, nobody knew where you were and nobody
But
could call you.
do you still remember your childhood phone number? I
I
feel like
think
those of us in our generation still
No.
remember. I still remember my childhood phone number.
I do
Oh
actually.
my
I do.
God.
I used
I
to know
don't.
everybody's phone number. Like,
Right. Right.
yeah,
We used
now,
our brains.
yeah,
Yeah.
we did use our brains. Now I don't even think I remember. I know my husband's phone number. That's it. I don't know anybody else's phone number.
I don't even know so I got my son his first cell phone for Christmas. Yeah, I don't think I have his number. I have my husband's memorized, mine memorized.
Oh my God, I don't know my teenagers. I
I
don't
don't know
his
my
phone
son's
number.
number.
anybody's
I
phone.
know it's programmed in. I
Right.
know that.
Which is crazy because like we literally live by our cell phones. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like
Yeah.
there's been
Yeah.
times where I've like walked out of the house and I had like a fit because I didn't have my cell phone with me. And then I was like, it'll be fine.
Mhm.
And I'm like, this is not gonna be fine. I like turn
It
around.
wasn't fine.
And
Mhm.
it wasn't fine. It was
Mhm.
not fine at all.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
crazy to me.
But I find that so interesting because we did not grow up with
Mm-mm.
them. So I can only imagine like the millennials and Gen Zers that grew up with their phones, like the whole, time they've been alive, they've had this thing.
Yeah.
How lost they probably feel without it. Because I feel completely lost when I don't know where my phone is.
Well,
And
what's
I just
interesting.
go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead. Sorry. I was
I
gonna
was gonna say
go
what's interesting. So my older son, he's 11, and I got him his first phone for Christmas. But it was really more so I had the comfort of being able to get a hold of him when he's out playing. He didn't yet. He had kind of asked for it, but he wasn't really
Right.
asking for it. And even right now, he's not into it. I have to
Mm.
remind him to take it with him when he's going out.
Wow.
Now, that said, I got him a locked down phone. So it's not, there's no games on it. So he has
Okay.
no, other than like texting me, there's really not a lot of things he wants to do with it. So, but yeah, I have to tell him to bring it. He's not into it yet.
Oh my God.
Okay.
I just got my 11-year-old a phone and he's got all the bells and whistles on it. And he got it for
Mm.
Christmas, but he had to be, I think he turned 10. So he's going to be 11. And we don't use it for punishment anymore because if you if you try to take away devices from kids these days, it's literally like severing an appendage because
Yeah.
they're like so attached to it. And I even told my husband, I'm like, don't even bother threatening to take the phone away from the teenager or anything because it doesn't make any sense. That's all they're going to hear. They're not going to hear about like what they might have done, talking
Yep.
about earlier, like how you handle things afterwards that makes the
Mhm.
difference.
Mhm.
So tell me, like robots, like
Mhm.
where I'm thinking Jetsons, like back in the day. Do you guys remember like watching the Jetsons and you're like,
Yep,
this is like
Rosie.
Yes.
so far away,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
are our kids gonna be like, they're not gonna have nannies for their kids? Are they gonna have like a robot for their kid? Are they gonna have like a housekeeper that's a robot?
I
Like
don't think so. I don't
no?
think it's not our kids. I think we're still a long
No.
way away
Our
from that.
grandkids.
I
Long way
mean,
from it.
even still, I think it's a long way away from that kind of a relationship or distancing. I mean, they'll certainly have more technology. I mean, just even little things like the baby monitor, right? There was no baby.
Right.
My mom didn't have a baby monitor. And even for my older son, I didn't even get a video one. I didn't want a video one. I got an audio one. But then for my second son, I have an 11-year-old and then a 3-year-old. For my 3-year-old, I got a gift as a video monitor. And yep, we use it. I didn't think I wanted one.
It's the best because then you hear a noise and you don't have to get out of bed. I would get out of bed like 800 times and then not get any sleep and be so tired. And with the baby monitor, you'd be like, it's fine. It's fine.
But my kids also both have a Google Mini in their room.
Really?
Because so for a while, Google had like a real deal on them. Like you could get one free easily. So my husband and I each got one. And yeah, well, where are we going to put them? In the kids' rooms. But we really do use it like for lullabies for the little one. And the 11-year-old, he uses it he puts on sleep sounds. He does ocean waves overnight. And he, uses it for the time and sets his own alarms and stuff and looks some stuff up every now and then. But yeah, that's weird.
It is weird. So do you work in like space, like with space, like when it comes to space and science, like how much, like how into it are you? Like, what are you doing? Like, let's geek out on that a little bit. Like,
well,
she's like
today,
very into it.
Yeah. She's like, let's just,
yeah. So right now I'm what we call a lead systems engineer of one of our satellite missions. But for the last decade or more, I bounced between being what we call a systems engineer and what we call a software engineer. I kind of hopped back and forth, but all related to different satellite missions. Primarily, I've supported the command and control side of it. So if you were watching the SpaceX launch, especially after the launch, they did show screenshots of folks in the control center. So there's like rows of computers and people sitting there. So the software that is used there, a lot of my career has been devoted to that kind of software that helps control the different satellites. But right now I'm the lead system engineer, which means, so for the satellite mission that I work on, that's going to launch in a few years, I help make sure the team is working together on one path is really the best way to describe it. It's technical in the sense that I have to understand a lot because I have to be able to communicate with 40 different people on what they do more specifically.
Yeah.
But I'm also not producing a lot of technical content myself. I'm really helping them to stay on one path is really what it is.
It just blows my mind. When I think of space and I think of like robots, like my brain does not work like that at all. Like I'm not, it just doesn't. And it kind of freaks me out a little bit, because I'm thinking we just sent 4 human beings, like civilians, like how'd they get picked? I'm just side note, like how did they
Honestly,
get
I
picked?
don't know. I really don't know. I hadn't followed that part of the story very clearly. I want to watch that next, that Netflix show.
Yeah,
I need to
yeah.
watch that because I think it's in there. The
Yeah, I
answer to
think
that
it is.
question's on that show.
Yeah, you're right. But like it kind of like
Yeah.
freaks me out because like I was listening to a podcast and it was like a woo-woo-y podcast and she's like, everything's energy, right? Everything's energy, everything's science. Like we're completely controlled by the moon. Like our whole planet is like mostly water, right? And then she was like saying that we're literally floating around space. Like we are
We are.
literally on a vessel floating in space. And that kind of made me like freak out for a second, and then my older one gets a little bit annoyed with me because I'm like, everything's energy. And he's like, oh yeah, mom, grab the crystals, like the moon and the sun and the beams. And hey man, and I'm like, no, seriously, the moon is like the moon is a force to not reckon with. They're like, right? I mean, because it controls a lot of stuff. Do you believe in that? Like, do you think that like from a
Well,
science?
there's 2 aspects to it. I mean, there is absolutely some like real science. The moon is responsible for the tides on the earth, so there's real things happening there. The moon orbits the earth with a certain periodicity, every 28 days. And a lot of our calendar comes from that. So yeah, so there's something to that. But on the flip side, when it comes into the kinds of things you're thinking, that you're describing, that's a little less scientific than today's science, I don't disbelieve in the sense that there is definitely going to be things out there in the universe that we still don't know. And I liken that to, so we have our cell phones, we have our TV, we're talking on the internet, magical energy waves. Like think about 400 or 500 years ago, before they knew that like electricity existed or was a force in the universe, before people really understood what magnetism was. There was a time we didn't know that. So everything we're doing right now, if we were to go back and try to explain it to them, we'd be burned at the stake. It would be completely ridiculous because they didn't understand. They didn't have that level of knowledge. So is there a level of knowledge that we still don't have? Sure. I'm absolutely willing to accept that. Do I believe that crystals actually do something? No, not necessarily, but I also have some right here on my desk.
Right.
But that's less of the that stuff and more the fact that I find it just I do find geology a little interesting, and to me it's fascinating that I have a rock, basically a crystal rock sitting here that came from the other side of our planet. And that I just find kind of like neat, which is one of the reasons why I have these.
Right.
So
or you even think about like the Himalayan salt crystals, like if we're getting into like the science and geology, that's a little bit of a different kind of like realm. But like they talk about it like, purifying the air, and then I was trying to explain to my son too, like with the moon and the cycle, like, a lot of people say like, oh my God, what's wrong with our kids? Or I had a friend of mine that worked in antepartum or whatever, and she was like, on a full moon, like more babies are born, it's like all this kind of stuff, like, and it's I don't know, it's interesting to me. Or like women's cycles, like not sorry, plug your ears, Frankie, but like, women's cycles, like there's a throughout history, I mean, everything is cycled around the moon. I swear to God, my dogs are crazy. Kids and dogs. I'm like, it's a full moon.
Yeah. Well, and yeah. So is there something to all that? Possibly. And we just don't understand. And I'm absolutely willing to accept that there are things we don't know, don't fully understand. And that's kind of one of the beautiful things about science is it is both reliable and subject to change and evolution in our knowledge. And that's kind of one of the things that makes it exciting to just study and be involved in, is because there's still so much to learn. We know a lot, but we have things to learn.
I know, it's crazy. Like, and how do we learn? Like, how do we like come up with these concepts? It's like one day are you all of a sudden like, let's make a cell phone. Yep, that's a good idea. Like, like it's just like, I mean, I don't know. Like I just
but that's it doesn't, it might for some people it might appear that way, but it really,
Right.
it's years and years and years and years of research, and everything builds on everything.